The cost behind the walls. In the heart of Chicago, one of the largest jail systems in the United States operates every single day. Cook County Jail. From the outside, it looks like a complex of buildings surrounded by fences, towers, and controlled entry points. A place designed for detention. A place where individuals are held while awaiting trial or serving shorter sentences. But what exists behind those walls is not only a correctional system. It is a system that costs millions to operate. And that cost does not stay inside the jail. It extends outward. To taxpayers. Because every day that the facility runs, resources are used. Staff are paid. Facilities are maintained. Medical care is provided. Security is enforced. And all of it is funded through public money. According to publicly available information, Cook County Jail is one of the largest single-site jails in the country. It processes thousands of individuals each year, many of whom are pretrial detainees, people who have not yet been convicted, but are held while awaiting court proceedings. This creates a unique system. Not a prison for long-term sentences. But a jail with constant movement. People arrive. People leave. The population changes continuously. And with that constant turnover comes operational complexity. Because the system must be ready at all times. To intake. To house. To supervise. Every day. Without pause. This requires infrastructure. Housing units that can manage large populations. Security systems that operate continuously. Administrative processes that track movement and status. And each of these elements has a cost. Not just once. But repeatedly. Because the system does not stop. It operates 24 hours a day. 7 days a week. 365 days a year. For taxpayers, this means funding a system that is always active. Even when it is not visible. Even when it is not part of daily life outside the facility. The cost continues. Utilities. Staffing. Maintenance. All necessary to keep the system functioning. But the financial impact is not only about size. It is about structure. Because jails like Cook County operate differently from prisons. They are not static populations. They are dynamic. Individuals may stay for short periods. Days. Weeks. Months. And during that time, they require the same level of supervision and support as long-term inmates. Housing. Food. Medical services. Each individual represents a cost. And when thousands move through the system, those costs add up quickly. According to publicly available reports, a significant portion of jail populations across the United States consists of pretrial detainees. This means individuals are held not because they have been sentenced, but because they are awaiting legal proceedings. This raises an important question. What does it cost to hold someone who has not yet been convicted? Because the system must treat every individual as part of its operation. Regardless of status. And that creates a financial burden that extends beyond individual cases. It becomes part of the overall system. At Cook County Jail, this burden is managed through a complex structure. Departments coordinate intake, housing, security, and services. Staff operate in shifts to ensure constant coverage. Systems are in place to track individuals, manage records, and maintain order. But each of these systems requires funding. Not only for initial setup, but for continuous operation. Because the system must remain active at all times. This is where the concept of taxpayer burden becomes clear. The cost of incarceration is not isolated. It is distributed. Across the public. Through budgets. Through funding allocations. Through the ongoing need to maintain the system. And while the jail serves a purpose within the justice system, that purpose comes with a financial reality. One that is often not visible from the outside. Because from the outside, the jail is just a structure. Walls. Fences. Buildings. But inside, it is a system. A system that consumes resources. Every hour. Every day. And over time, those resources become a significant expense. For staff, this system is operational. According to publicly available information, correctional officers, administrative personnel, and support staff work together to keep the facility running. Their roles are essential to maintaining order, processing individuals, and ensuring that procedures are followed. But staffing is also one of the largest costs. Salaries. Training. Overtime. All part of maintaining a system that cannot shut down. Because unlike other public services, a jail does not have off hours. It is always active. And that means staffing must always be present. For individuals inside, the financial structure is not visible in daily life. What is visible is the routine. The intake process. The housing assignments. The daily schedule. But behind that routine is a system supported by funding. A system that requires resources to function. And without those resources, the system cannot operate. This creates a direct connection between the facility and the public. Because the cost of maintaining Cook County Jail is not contained within its walls. It extends outward. To budgets. To policies. To taxpayers. And over time, that connection becomes significant. Because as the system grows, as the population changes, as the demands increase, the cost continues. Not as a one-time expense. But as an ongoing requirement. This is the foundation of the story. Not only what happens inside the jail, but what it costs to keep it running. Because behind every cell, every corridor, every procedure, there is a financial structure. A structure that supports the system. And a structure that defines its impact beyond the walls. The daily machine of cost. Inside Cook County Jail, the system does not pause. It does not slow down. It does not wait. Because every single day, the jail operates like a machine. A machine built on intake, processing, supervision, and release. And every part of that machine carries a cost. Not a one-time cost. A daily cost. A repeating cost. One that continues whether the public is watching or not. The day begins long before most people outside the facility are awake. Shifts change. Staff arrive. Operations continue without interruption. Because unlike many public institutions, a jail cannot close its doors. It cannot delay its responsibilities. It must function at all times. And that constant operation requires resources. According to publicly available information, Cook County Jail processes a large number of individuals on a daily basis. New detainees are brought in through law enforcement activity, court decisions, and transfers. Each arrival begins a process. Identification. Search. Medical screening. Classification. This is not a simple intake. It is a system of steps designed to ensure safety, organization, and compliance with regulations. But every step requires personnel. Correctional officers. Medical staff. Administrative workers. And each of these roles represents a cost. Because the system cannot function without them. The intake process alone is a significant part of daily operations. New individuals must be processed quickly, but accurately. Records must be created. Information must be verified. Housing assignments must be determined. All of this happens within a structured system. And all of it requires funding. Because time is not free. Labor is not free. And the system depends on both. Once individuals are processed, they are assigned to housing units. This introduces another layer of cost. Housing is not just about space. It is about management. Each unit requires supervision. Each movement requires coordination. Each individual must be accounted for. This creates a continuous demand for staffing. Officers assigned to specific areas. Supervisors overseeing operations. Support staff maintaining records and communication. Because in a jail of this size, organization is critical. Without it, the system cannot function. Meals are another daily cost. According to publicly available reports, jails must provide food to every individual in custody. This is not optional. 3 meals a day. Prepared. Distributed. Managed. Each meal involves logistics. Food procurement. Preparation facilities. Staff to cook and serve. And when multiplied by thousands of individuals, the cost becomes significant. Not once, but every day. Healthcare adds another layer. According to publicly available information, jails are responsible for providing medical care to detainees. This includes initial screenings, ongoing treatment, and emergency services when needed. Medical staff must be available. Doctors. Nurses. Support personnel. Facilities must be equipped. Supplies must be maintained. And all of this operates continuously. Because health needs do not follow a schedule. They can arise at any time. And the system must be ready to respond. This readiness is part of the cost. Not just the treatment itself, but the ability to provide it at all times. Security is constant. Movement within the jail is controlled. Individuals are escorted. Doors are operated. Access points are monitored. Every part of the facility requires supervision. And supervision requires staffing. According to publicly available data, staffing is one of the largest expenses in correctional systems. Salaries, training, benefits, and overtime all contribute to the overall cost. Because the system cannot operate without people. Technology also plays a role. Surveillance systems. Communication systems. Record-keeping systems. These tools support the operation of the jail. But they also require maintenance. Upgrades. Repairs. Monitoring. And each of these elements adds to the daily cost. The jail is not only a place of detention. It is an operational system. One that must function continuously. And that continuous function is what drives cost. But the daily machine of cost is not only about operations. It is about repetition. The same process is repeated every day. Intake. Housing. Meals. Healthcare. Security. Each day follows a similar pattern. And each day incurs similar costs. This repetition is what makes the financial burden significant. Because the cost is not occasional. It is constant. For taxpayers, this means funding a system that operates every day without interruption. Even when it is not visible. Even when it is not part of daily awareness. The cost continues. Quietly. Consistently. Over time, this creates a cumulative effect. Daily expenses add up. Weekly costs increase. Annual budgets grow. And the system remains active. Because it must. For staff, this daily machine is routine. They follow procedures. They perform assigned roles. They maintain the structure of the system. But behind that routine is a financial reality. Every action has a cost. Every process requires resources. And every day of operation contributes to the overall burden. For individuals inside, the system is experienced differently. What they see is the routine. The intake process. The housing assignments. The daily schedule. But what they do not see is the financial structure behind it. The cost of each step. The resources required to maintain it. And how that connects to the broader system. Because the jail does not operate in isolation. It is part of a larger network. Law enforcement. Courts. Public funding. And within that network, the cost is distributed. But always present. This is what defines the daily machine of cost. Not a single expense. Not a one-time event. But a continuous process. A system that operates every hour of every day. And a system that requires funding to continue operating. Because without resources, the machine stops. And stopping is not an option. So the system continues. Day after day. Process after process. Cost after cost. And within that cycle, the true scale of the burden becomes clear. Not in a single moment. But over time. Through repetition. Through continuity. Through the ongoing operation of a system that never pauses. The price of pretrial detention. Inside Cook County Jail, one of the most significant drivers of cost is not long-term incarceration. It is pretrial detention. Because a large portion of the population inside the jail has not been convicted of a crime. They are waiting. Waiting for court dates. Waiting for hearings. Waiting for decisions that will determine what happens next. And during that time, they are held within the system. Fully. Not partially. Which means they require the same resources as anyone else inside the facility. Housing. Food. Security. Medical care. Every day they remain in custody adds to the total cost. And when thousands of individuals are held under these conditions, the financial impact becomes significant. According to publicly available information and reports, jails across the United States, including Cook County, hold a high percentage of pretrial detainees. These individuals are not serving sentences, but they are still part of the jail's daily operations. This creates a unique financial situation. Because the system must allocate resources for individuals whose legal status is still unresolved. The jail cannot reduce services based on that status. It must operate at full capacity for every person in custody. And that means the cost applies equally. Whether someone stays for a day or for several months. The intake process begins the expense. From the moment an individual enters the system, resources are used. Processing. Screening. Assignment. And once that process is complete, the daily cost begins. Each day adds to the total. Not as a fixed number that stops at a certain point. But as a continuous accumulation. Because the system does not pause while cases move through the courts. It continues to operate. And during that time, individuals remain in custody. Court delays contribute to this dynamic. According to publicly available reports, legal proceedings can take time. Scheduling. Case preparation. Availability of courts. All of these factors influence how long someone remains in pretrial detention. And while those processes unfold, the jail continues to provide services. Every day. Without interruption. This creates a connection between the legal system and the financial system. Because the longer a case takes, the longer an individual remains in custody. And the longer they remain in custody, the higher the cost. Not only for the individual, but for the system as a whole. For taxpayers, this means funding detention that is not always tied to a final outcome. Because pretrial detention exists before a verdict is reached. And during that time, the system must operate at full capacity. This raises important questions. What is the cost of holding individuals who have not been convicted? How does the length of detention impact the overall budget? And how does this affect the broader system? These questions are part of ongoing public discussions. According to publicly available information, different jurisdictions have explored ways to address pretrial detention, including policy changes and alternative approaches. But regardless of those discussions, the current system continues to operate. And Cook County Jail remains part of that system. The financial impact is not only about the number of individuals. It is also about the nature of their stay. Short-term detention may seem less significant. But when multiplied across large populations, it becomes substantial. Each individual requires resources. Each day adds cost. And when turnover is high, the system must constantly repeat the same processes. Intake. Housing. Release. Over and over again. This repetition creates ongoing expenses. Not a one-time investment, but a continuous cycle. Healthcare is another factor. According to publicly available information, individuals entering jail may require medical evaluation and treatment. This includes both physical and mental health services. These services are necessary. But they also add to the cost. Because healthcare must be available at all times. Not only for long-term inmates, but for every individual entering the system. This means that even short stays involve resource use. Screenings. Assessments. Potential treatment. And when multiplied across thousands of individuals, the impact grows. Security remains constant as well. Regardless of legal status, every individual must be supervised. Movement must be controlled. Procedures must be followed. And this requires staffing, which contributes to the overall cost. Because staffing is one of the largest expenses in the system. Salaries. Training. Overtime. All part of maintaining a facility that operates continuously. The physical infrastructure also plays a role. Housing units must be maintained. Utilities must be provided. Facilities must remain operational. Even when individuals stay for short periods, the infrastructure must support them. And that support has a cost. For individuals inside, pretrial detention is experienced as part of daily life. The routine. The environment. The waiting. But behind that experience is a system that is actively using resources. A system that must operate regardless of outcome. Because until a decision is made, the individual remains in custody. And the system continues to provide for them. For staff, this creates a dynamic environment. Constant intake. Constant release. Constant movement. And within that, the system must remain organized. Procedures must be followed. Records must be maintained. Coordination must be consistent. Because the flow of individuals does not stop. And neither does the system. This is what defines the price of pretrial detention. Not a single cost, but a cumulative one. A cost that builds over time. A cost that is influenced by legal processes. A cost that is distributed across the system. And ultimately, a cost that is borne by taxpayers. Because the funding for this system comes from public resources. Budgets allocated to maintain operations. Resources dedicated to ensure that the system functions. And as long as pretrial detention remains a central part of the system, that cost will continue. Day after day. Case after case. Individual after individual. Because at Cook County Jail, the price of detention is not only measured by time served. It is measured by time spent waiting. And the longer that wait continues, the greater the cost becomes. The cost of healthcare behind bars. Inside Cook County Jail, one of the most complex and expensive parts of the system is not security. It is healthcare. Because unlike many other public systems, a jail is responsible for the well-being of every individual in its custody. Not optionally. Not partially. But fully. From the moment someone enters the facility, their medical needs become the responsibility of the system. And that responsibility comes with a cost. A continuous cost. A cost that does not stop. According to publicly available information and reports, correctional facilities across the United States are legally required to provide medical care to detainees. This includes physical health, mental health, and emergency services. This requirement is not limited by the length of stay. Whether an individual is in custody for a day or several months, the system must be prepared to provide care. And that preparation requires resources. The process begins during intake. Every individual entering the jail undergoes a medical screening. Basic health checks. Assessment of immediate needs. Identification of potential risks. This is necessary to ensure safety. But it also requires staff. Medical professionals must be present. Facilities must be equipped. Records must be maintained. And each of these elements adds to the cost. Because healthcare is not a one-time service. It is ongoing. Once individuals are housed, their medical needs do not disappear. Some require regular treatment. Chronic conditions. Ongoing medications. Scheduled appointments. Others may require unexpected care. Injuries. Illness. Emergency situations. And the system must be ready to respond to all of it. At any time. This creates a constant demand for healthcare services. Doctors. Nurses. Mental health professionals. Working within the facility. Providing care within a controlled environment. And that environment adds complexity. Because healthcare in a jail is not the same as healthcare outside. Movement is restricted. Security must be maintained. Appointments must be coordinated with supervision. Every aspect of care must align with the system's structure. Which increases the operational cost. Mental health is a significant part of this. According to publicly available reports, a large percentage of individuals in jail populations experience mental health challenges. This requires specialized services. Assessments. Counseling. Crisis intervention. And these services must be available within the facility. Not occasionally. But consistently. Because the need does not follow a schedule. It can arise at any moment. And the system must be prepared. This adds another layer to the cost. Not only providing care, but maintaining the capacity to provide it at all times. Medications are another factor. According to publicly available information, individuals in custody may require prescribed medications. These must be provided regularly. Tracked. Stored. Distributed. And managed carefully. Because accuracy is essential. This creates logistical demands. Pharmacy systems. Medical records. Staff to oversee distribution. And each of these elements contributes to the overall expense. Emergency care adds even more complexity. Situations can arise that require immediate attention. Medical emergencies. Acute conditions. Unexpected incidents. And the system must respond quickly. This may involve on-site treatment. Or, in some cases, transport to external medical facilities. Which introduces additional costs. Transportation. Security during transport. Coordination with outside providers. All part of ensuring that care is provided. Because once an individual is in custody, their care is the responsibility of the system. And that responsibility does not change based on cost. For taxpayers, this creates a significant financial burden. Because healthcare is one of the most expensive components of any system. And when applied to a large, continuously operating facility, the cost becomes substantial. Not just in total, but in daily operation. Every day, healthcare services are provided. Every day, resources are used. Every day, costs are incurred. And over time, these costs add up. Not as a single expense, but as a continuous requirement. For staff, healthcare operations are integrated into the system. Medical personnel work alongside correctional staff. Coordination is constant. Because care must be provided within the structure of security. Appointments must align with movement schedules. Treatments must follow procedures. And all of this requires organization. Because the system must balance two priorities. Care and control. Both essential. Both requiring resources. For individuals inside, healthcare is part of daily life. Access to medical services. Scheduled appointments. Interactions with healthcare staff. But behind these services is a system that must manage them. A system that must allocate resources. A system that must ensure that care is delivered consistently. And that system has a cost. The physical infrastructure also plays a role. Medical units within the facility. Equipment. Supplies. All of these must be maintained. Repaired. Updated. Replaced when necessary. And this adds to the long-term cost of operation. Because healthcare is not static. It evolves. Standards change. Needs increase. Resources must adapt. And the system must keep up. This creates ongoing financial demand. Not only to maintain current services, but to improve them when required. This is what defines the cost of healthcare behind bars. Not a single service. Not a one-time expense. But a continuous system. Operating every day. Responding to needs. Providing care. And requiring resources to do so. Because at Cook County Jail, healthcare is not optional. It is essential. And that essential service comes with a cost that extends beyond the walls. A cost that is carried by the system. And funded by the public. Every day. Without interruption. Staffing the system. Inside Cook County Jail, the system does not run on buildings alone. It runs on people. Because no matter how advanced the infrastructure becomes, no matter how structured the procedures are, the operation of a jail depends on staffing. Correctional officers. Medical personnel. Administrative workers. Support staff. Each role is essential. And each role carries a cost. Not just a one-time cost. A continuous, expanding cost that grows with the size and complexity of the system. According to publicly available information and reports, staffing is one of the largest expenses in correctional facilities across the United States. Salaries, benefits, training, and overtime all contribute to the overall financial burden. Because unlike equipment or infrastructure, staffing is not static. It requires constant investment. People must be paid. Shifts must be covered. Operations must continue without interruption. At Cook County Jail, this demand is amplified by scale. The facility operates 24 hours a day. 7 days a week. Which means staffing must also operate continuously. Morning shifts. Evening shifts. Overnight shifts. Every hour requires personnel. And every shift adds to the cost. Correctional officers form the backbone of daily operations. They oversee housing units. Monitor movement. Maintain order. Their presence is constant. Because without supervision, the system cannot function. Every unit requires coverage. Every corridor requires oversight. Every movement requires coordination. This creates a large staffing requirement. Not just for routine operations, but for contingencies. Backup staff. Supervisors. Specialized units. All necessary to ensure that the system remains stable. Training is another factor. According to publicly available information, correctional staff must be trained to handle a wide range of situations. Security procedures. Emergency response. Communication protocols. This training requires time, resources, facilities, and it must be updated regularly. Because standards evolve, procedures change, and staff must remain prepared. This adds another layer to the cost. Not only employing staff, but maintaining their readiness. Overtime is a significant component as well. In a system that cannot pause, gaps in staffing must be filled. If shifts are understaffed, additional hours are required. And those hours come at a higher cost. According to publicly available reports, overtime expenses can become substantial in large correctional systems. Because the need for coverage is constant. And any shortage must be addressed immediately. Benefits also contribute to the financial structure. Healthcare. Retirement plans. Other employment benefits. These are part of the total cost of staffing. Not always visible in daily operations, but essential to maintaining the workforce. Administrative staff play a different role, but one that is equally important. Records must be maintained. Court dates tracked. Documentation processed. Because the jail does not operate in isolation. It is connected to the legal system. And that connection requires coordination. Clerks. Case managers. Administrative personnel. All working behind the scenes to keep the system organized. And each of these roles adds to the overall cost. Medical staff, as discussed previously, are another critical component. Doctors. Nurses. Mental health professionals. Their presence is required. Not occasionally, but continuously. Because healthcare needs do not follow a schedule. And the system must be prepared to respond at all times. Support staff complete the system. Maintenance workers. Food service personnel. Cleaning crews. These roles ensure that the facility remains operational. That food is prepared. That the environment is maintained. That basic functions continue without disruption. And while these roles may not always be visible, they are essential. Because without them, the system would not function. For taxpayers, this creates a significant financial reality. Because staffing is not optional. It is required. And the larger the facility, the greater the demand. More individuals in custody means more staff. More staff means higher costs. And those costs are ongoing. Not a one-time investment, but a continuous expense. For staff, the experience is defined by routine and responsibility. Shifts begin and end. Procedures are followed. The environment remains consistent. But behind that routine is a system that depends on their presence. Without staff, there is no supervision. Without supervision, there is no control. And without control, the system cannot function. This creates a direct link between staffing and stability. Because maintaining order requires people. Not just systems. Not just structures. But individuals performing roles within the system. And each of those individuals represents a cost. For individuals inside the jail, staffing is part of daily life. Interactions with officers. Medical appointments. Administrative processes. All facilitated by staff. But what is not always visible is the scale of that workforce. The number of people required to keep the system running. And the cost associated with that requirement. Because every interaction, every procedure, every part of daily life is supported by staffing. And staffing requires funding. This is what defines the cost of staffing the system. Not just the number of employees, but the continuous need for their presence. The ongoing requirement to maintain coverage. The necessity of training, benefits, and support. And the reality that the system cannot operate without them. Because at Cook County Jail, the system is not automated. It is human. And that humanity is both its strength and its cost. A cost that continues every day. Every shift. Every hour. As long as the system remains active. The hidden cost of infrastructure. Inside Cook County Jail, the system is not only supported by people. It is supported by infrastructure. Buildings. Utilities. Systems that operate behind the scenes. And while these elements are not always visible, they are essential. Because without infrastructure, the system cannot function. And maintaining that infrastructure comes with a cost. A continuous cost. One that grows over time. Because infrastructure does not maintain itself. It requires upkeep. Maintenance. Repairs. Upgrades. And each of these elements adds to the overall financial burden. According to publicly available information and reports, correctional facilities like Cook County Jail operate as large-scale physical complexes. Multiple buildings, housing units, administrative offices, and support areas all function together as part of a single system. Each building requires maintenance. Walls must be repaired. Doors must function properly. Security systems must remain operational. Because in a facility where control is critical, even small failures can have larger consequences. A malfunctioning door. A broken lock. A damaged structure. Each issue must be addressed quickly. And addressing it requires resources. Maintenance staff. Replacement parts. Time. All contributing to the cost. Utilities are another major factor. According to publicly available data, facilities of this size consume large amounts of energy. Electricity for lighting. Power for security systems. Heating and cooling for multiple buildings. And these systems operate continuously. Day and night. Because the jail does not close. Lights must remain on. Systems must remain active. Conditions must remain stable. This creates a constant demand for energy. And energy has a cost. Water usage is also significant. Thousands of individuals require access to water every day. For drinking. For sanitation. For cleaning. And the infrastructure must support that demand. Pipes. Systems. Treatment processes. All requiring maintenance. All contributing to the overall expense. Waste management is another layer. Facilities must manage waste generated daily. Food waste. General waste. Medical waste. Each type requires proper handling. Collection. Processing. Disposal. And each step involves cost. Because these processes must meet regulatory standards. They cannot be reduced or ignored. They are part of the system's responsibility. Technology infrastructure adds further complexity. Surveillance systems monitor movement. Cameras operate continuously. Recording. Storing data. Communication systems connect different parts of the facility. Radios. Control rooms. Internal networks. And record-keeping systems track information. Detainee records. Schedules. Operations. These systems are essential. But they require maintenance. Updates. Repairs. Security measures. Because technology evolves. And the system must keep up. This creates ongoing costs. Not only to maintain existing systems, but to upgrade them when necessary. The physical age of infrastructure also matters. According to publicly available information, older facilities often require more maintenance. Systems wear out. Structures deteriorate. Repairs become more frequent. And over time, the cost increases. Because maintaining aging infrastructure is not a one-time effort. It is continuous. And sometimes, it requires major investment. Renovations. Replacements. Upgrades. Each involving significant expense. For taxpayers, this creates a long-term financial commitment. Because infrastructure is not temporary. It is permanent. And maintaining it requires consistent funding. Not only for daily operations, but for long-term sustainability. For staff, infrastructure is part of daily work. Maintenance teams respond to issues. Engineers oversee systems. Supervisors ensure that facilities remain operational. Because without functioning infrastructure, the system cannot run. Housing units must remain secure. Utilities must remain active. Systems must remain reliable. And maintaining that reliability requires effort. For individuals inside the jail, infrastructure is part of the environment. The buildings. The systems. The conditions. But what is not always visible is the cost behind it. The resources required to keep everything functioning. The work required to maintain stability. Because while the environment may appear constant, it requires continuous effort to remain that way. This is what defines the hidden cost of infrastructure. Not a single expense, but an ongoing requirement. A system that must be maintained every day. Every hour. Without interruption. Because infrastructure does not pause. It operates continuously. And when it fails, the system is affected. Which is why maintenance is essential. And why the cost continues. The connection between infrastructure and operation is direct. Without functioning buildings, there is no housing. Without utilities, there is no operation. Without systems, there is no control. And because of this, infrastructure becomes one of the most important, and expensive, parts of the system. Not always visible. Not always discussed. But always present. Always contributing to the overall cost. Because at Cook County Jail, the system is not only built on people and procedures. It is built on physical structures. Structures that require constant attention. Constant maintenance. Constant funding. And within that, the true scale of the system becomes clear. Not just in its operations, but in what it takes to keep those operations running. Day after day. Year after year. The legal system and the cost of delay. Inside Cook County Jail, time is not only measured by days. It is measured by process. Court dates. Hearings. Legal procedures that determine how long an individual remains in custody. And within that process, one of the most significant factors affecting cost is delay. Because the jail does not control the legal timeline. But it is directly affected by it. Every day that a case remains unresolved is another day that an individual stays in custody. And every additional day adds to the total cost. Not in theory, but in practice. Housing. Food. Healthcare. Security. All continue. All require resources. All contribute to the overall financial burden. According to publicly available information and reports, delays in the legal system can occur for many reasons. Court scheduling. Case complexity. Availability of legal representation. Each factor influences how long it takes for a case to move forward. And while those processes unfold, the jail continues to operate at full capacity. Because it must. It cannot pause operations while cases are pending. It cannot reduce services based on timeline. It must provide for every individual in custody. Every day. This creates a direct link between the speed of the legal system and the cost of detention. The longer the delay, the higher the cost. For taxpayers, this means funding not only the jail itself, but the time individuals spend within it while awaiting legal outcomes. Time that is influenced by processes outside the facility. Time that still requires resources. Time that still carries a cost. Court appearances are part of this system. Individuals must be transported. Security must be provided. Coordination must occur between the jail and the courts. Each movement requires staff. Planning. Execution. Supervision. And each of these steps adds to the cost. Because transportation is not simple. It involves vehicles, personnel, scheduling, and the need to maintain security throughout the process. If a court date is postponed, the process repeats. Another day in custody. Another scheduled transport. Another set of resources used. This repetition increases the overall expense. Because the system must be ready to respond each time. Legal representation also plays a role. According to publicly available reports, access to attorneys, case preparation, and legal proceedings can all influence the timeline of detention. These processes are essential to the justice system. But they also affect how long individuals remain in custody. And while those processes continue, the jail remains responsible for housing and supervision. Which means the cost continues as well. Administrative coordination is another factor. Records must be maintained. Court dates tracked. Documentation processed. Because the jail must remain connected to the legal system. Information must be accurate. Up to date. Accessible. And maintaining that system requires staff. Clerks. Case managers. Administrative personnel. All contributing to the operation. And all adding to the cost. For individuals inside, delays are experienced as waiting. Time spent in custody without resolution. Time structured by routine. But behind that experience is a system that continues to operate. A system that continues to use resources. A system that continues to incur cost. Because regardless of the outcome, the time spent in detention must be supported. For staff, delays create ongoing demand. Individuals remain in custody longer. Housing units remain full. Operations continue at the same level. Or higher. Because increased population means increased workload. More supervision. More coordination. More responsibility. And within that, the system must adapt. Not by slowing down. But by maintaining its pace. Even as timelines extend. The broader system is interconnected. Law enforcement, courts, and correctional facilities all play a role. And delays in one part affect the others. Because the system operates as a whole. Not as separate pieces. And within that whole, the jail becomes the place where time is held. Where individuals remain while processes continue. And where the cost accumulates. This accumulation is not always visible. It happens day by day. Incrementally. But over time, it becomes significant. Because each additional day adds to the total. Each delay increases the burden. And each case contributes to the overall cost. For taxpayers, this means funding a system that is influenced by factors beyond the jail itself. Court schedules. Legal processes. Administrative timelines. All part of the equation. And all affecting the cost. This raises broader questions. How does the speed of the legal system impact detention costs? What role do delays play in the overall financial burden? And how can systems be coordinated more effectively? These are questions that continue to be discussed. But regardless of those discussions, the current system remains in place. And Cook County Jail continues to operate within it. Every day. Every case. Every delay, adding to the total cost. Because the jail is not only a place of detention. It is a place where time is held. And when that time extends, the cost extends with it. Not as a single expense, but as a continuous accumulation. One that grows with each passing day. One that reflects the connection between the legal system and the financial system. And one that defines the true impact of delay. Because at Cook County Jail, time is not only a measure of process. It is a measure of cost. And the longer that process takes, the greater the burden becomes. The cost of turnover. Inside Cook County Jail, one of the most overlooked drivers of cost is not how long people stay. It is how often they move. Because Cook County Jail is not a static environment. It is constantly changing. People arrive. People are released. People are transferred. Every day. And each of these movements carries a cost. Not just in time, but in resources. Because every new arrival begins a process. And every release completes one. But in between, the system must operate fully. And when this cycle repeats thousands of times, the cost becomes significant. According to publicly available information, large county jails like Cook County process a high volume of individuals annually. This means the system is not only managing those currently inside, but also constantly handling new entries and exits. This creates a cycle. Intake. Processing. Housing. Release. And then it starts again. Each step requires staff. Each step requires coordination. Each step requires resources. And none of these steps are optional. Because the system must account for every individual. From entry to exit. The intake process, as discussed earlier, is resource-intensive. Identification. Screening. Classification. Each new individual must go through these steps. Even if they stay for a short time. Even if they are released quickly. The process remains the same. Because accuracy and security are essential. This means that high turnover does not reduce cost. It increases it. Because the system must repeat the same processes more frequently. More arrivals mean more intake procedures. More releases mean more administrative work. More movement means more coordination. And all of this requires staffing. Administrative processing is a major part of turnover. Records must be created. Updated. Closed. Documentation must be accurate. Because the system must track every individual. Every movement. Every change in status. This creates a continuous workload for administrative staff. Clerks. Case managers. Records personnel. All working to maintain accurate information. And each of these roles contributes to the overall cost. Release procedures also require resources. Verification of identity. Processing of paperwork. Coordination with external agencies. Because releasing an individual is not simply opening a door. It is a structured process. One that must be completed correctly. And that process requires time. And staff. Transportation adds another layer. Individuals may be transferred to court, other facilities, or released to external supervision. Each movement requires planning. Vehicles. Personnel. Security. And these movements occur frequently. Because turnover is constant. According to publicly available reports, transportation and coordination between agencies are significant operational components in large jail systems. And each movement adds to the cost. Because the system must be ready to move individuals at any time. Housing management is also affected by turnover. Beds must be assigned. Reassigned. Prepared for new occupants. This requires coordination. Cleaning. Maintenance. Supervision. Because each housing unit must remain operational, even as occupants change. This creates a dynamic environment. Not static. Not fixed. But constantly shifting. And managing that shift requires resources. For staff, turnover creates a continuous workload. New individuals must be processed. Existing individuals must be monitored. Departing individuals must be released. And this cycle repeats. Without pause. Because the flow of individuals does not stop. This increases the demand for coordination. Communication between departments. Timing of processes. Accuracy of records. Because any error can affect the system. And maintaining accuracy requires effort. For individuals inside, turnover is part of the environment. New people arrive. Others leave. The population changes. But what is not visible is the cost behind that movement. The resources required to manage it. The systems required to track it. Because while movement may seem routine, it is resource-intensive. And when multiplied across thousands of individuals, the impact grows. Healthcare is also affected by turnover. Each new individual requires medical screening. Each departure requires documentation. And if individuals stay for short periods, the system must still provide care during that time. This creates repeated demand. Not continuous for one individual, but repeated across many. Which increases the overall cost. Security must adapt to turnover as well. New individuals must be integrated into the system. Housing assignments must be managed. Movement must be controlled. Because the environment must remain stable. Even as the population changes. This requires vigilance. Coordination. And staffing. All contributing to the cost. For taxpayers, turnover represents a hidden expense. Because it is not always visible in simple population numbers. The number of individuals inside at a given moment does not reflect how many pass through the system over time. And each person who passes through uses resources. Even if only for a short period. This means the total cost is influenced not only by how many people are in the jail, but by how many people move through it. And the frequency of that movement. This is what defines the cost of turnover. Not the length of stay, but the repetition of process. The constant cycling of individuals through the system. And the resources required to manage that cycle. Because at Cook County Jail, the system is always active. Always processing. Always moving. And within that movement, the cost continues. Not in large, visible moments. But in repeated, consistent operations. Day after day. Entry after entry. Release after release. And over time, that repetition becomes one of the most significant contributors to the overall financial burden. Because the system does not only hold people. It processes them. Continuously. And every process has a cost. A cost that adds up. A cost that extends beyond the walls. A cost that is carried by the system. And ultimately, by the public. The broader system cost. Inside Cook County Jail, the cost of detention is visible in daily operations. Staffing. Healthcare. Infrastructure. Security. But the financial impact does not stop at the jail's walls. Because Cook County Jail is not an isolated system. It is part of a larger network. A network that includes law enforcement, courts, public services, and community systems. And within that network, the cost expands. Beyond what is immediately visible. According to publicly available information and reports, correctional systems are deeply interconnected with other parts of government. Actions taken in one area directly affect others. An arrest leads to intake. A court decision leads to detention or release. A delay leads to extended custody. Each step is connected. And each connection carries cost. Law enforcement is the starting point. When individuals are arrested, they enter the system. Transportation to the jail. Processing. Documentation. All part of the initial phase. And each step requires resources. Personnel. Vehicles. Time. These costs are separate from the jail's operations. But they contribute to the overall system. Because without law enforcement, the intake process would not exist. The court system is another major component. Judges, attorneys, clerks, and administrative staff all play a role in determining how long individuals remain in custody. Court hearings must be scheduled. Cases must be processed. Decisions must be made. And while these processes unfold, individuals remain in the jail. Which means the cost continues. This creates a direct link between court operations and detention expenses. The slower the process, the longer the detention. The longer the detention, the higher the cost. Public defender systems and legal representation also contribute to the broader cost. According to publicly available reports, providing legal representation is a fundamental part of the justice system. Attorneys must prepare cases, meet with clients, attend hearings. And these services are funded publicly in many cases. Which means the cost extends beyond the jail. It becomes part of the larger system. Social services are another layer. When individuals are released, they may require support. Housing assistance. Employment programs. Rehabilitation services. These services are not part of the jail's budget. But they are connected to the system. Because the outcome of detention affects what happens next. And supporting individuals after release requires resources. Healthcare systems outside the jail are also affected. According to publicly available information, individuals who receive care in custody may require continued treatment after release. This creates a transition from jail-based healthcare to community healthcare. And managing that transition involves coordination. Resources. Funding. Because care does not stop at release. It continues. And the cost shifts from one system to another. Transportation systems are also involved. Moving individuals between facilities. Transporting them to court. Coordinating with other agencies. Each movement requires resources. Vehicles. Personnel. Planning. And these costs extend beyond the jail's internal operations. They are part of the broader system. Administrative coordination connects all of these elements. Records must be shared. Information must be accurate. Systems must communicate. Because the jail, the courts, and other agencies must operate together. This requires technology. Staff. Processes. And all of these elements contribute to the overall cost. For taxpayers, this means funding not just a single facility, but an entire system. A network of services that work together. And that network is complex. Because each part depends on the others. If one part slows down, the others are affected. If one part increases in demand, the others must adapt. And within that interconnected system, costs accumulate. Not in one place, but across multiple areas. For staff within the jail, this broader system is part of daily operations. Coordination with courts. Communication with law enforcement. Interaction with external agencies. All necessary to keep the system functioning. Because the jail does not operate independently. It is part of a larger structure. And that structure requires coordination. For individuals inside, the broader system is experienced through process. Court appearances. Legal representation. Potential release. But behind these experiences is a network of services. A network that supports the system. And that network has a cost. Because each service requires resources. Each connection requires coordination. And each part contributes to the overall financial burden. This is what defines the broader system cost. Not a single expense. But a collection of expenses. A network of costs that extend beyond the jail. And that are connected through process. Because Cook County Jail is not the end of the system. It is one part of it. A central part. But still part of something larger. And within that larger system, the financial impact grows. Through connection. Through coordination. Through the ongoing operation of multiple services working together. This creates a cumulative effect. Costs from different areas combine. Budgets overlap. Resources are shared. And the total becomes significant. Because it reflects not just the cost of detention, but the cost of the entire system. A system that operates continuously. A system that requires funding. A system that impacts the public. Because at every level, from arrest to release, resources are used. And those resources are funded by taxpayers. This is the reality of the broader system. Not isolated. Not limited. But interconnected. And within that connection, the true scale of the cost becomes clear. Not only inside the jail, but across the entire network that supports it. The long-term financial impact. Inside Cook County Jail, the cost of detention is often measured day by day. Daily staffing. Daily meals. Daily operations. But the true financial impact is not limited to daily expenses. It extends over time. Years. Decades. Because the system is not temporary. It is continuous. And when a system operates continuously, its costs become long-term. According to publicly available information and reports, large correctional systems require sustained funding over extended periods. Budgets are not set for a single year in isolation, they must account for ongoing operations, future needs, and rising costs. This creates a financial commitment. Not just for today, but for the future. Infrastructure is one of the clearest examples. Buildings do not last forever. Systems wear out. Facilities age. And over time, maintenance alone is not enough. Renovations become necessary. Upgrades are required. In some cases, entire sections must be rebuilt. These are not small expenses. They are large-scale investments. Funded through public budgets. And planned over long periods. Because the system must remain operational. Even as it ages. Staffing costs also grow over time. Salaries increase. Benefits expand. Training evolves. According to publicly available reports, long-term employment costs in correctional systems are significant. Not only for current staff, but for future obligations. Retirement benefits. Pension systems. Healthcare coverage. These commitments extend beyond active employment. They become part of long-term financial planning. Because once the system employs staff, it also assumes responsibility for future costs. This creates a layered financial structure. Immediate expenses. And future obligations. Both contributing to the overall burden. Healthcare costs continue to rise as well. Medical standards evolve. Treatments become more advanced. Costs increase. According to publicly available information, healthcare is one of the fastest growing expenses in correctional systems. And this growth does not stop. It continues year after year. Because healthcare needs do not decrease. They expand. And the system must adapt. Which means more funding. More resources. More long-term investment. Technology adds another dimension. Systems that are modern today will become outdated. Surveillance equipment. Communication systems. Data management tools. All require updates. And those updates are not optional. Because outdated systems can affect security and efficiency. This creates ongoing costs. Not just for maintenance, but for replacement. And as technology evolves, the cost of keeping up increases. Population trends also influence long-term impact. According to publicly available reports, changes in arrest rates, legal policies, and social factors can affect the number of individuals in custody. If population increases, costs rise. More individuals require more resources. More staffing. More infrastructure. If population decreases, costs may not drop immediately. Because the system still requires baseline operations. Facilities must remain open. Staff must remain employed. This creates a financial structure that does not adjust quickly. Which means long-term planning is essential. Because changes in the system take time. And funding must account for that. Legal and policy changes also play a role. Reforms in bail systems, sentencing policies, and detention practices can influence how the jail operates. But implementing these changes requires resources. Training staff. Updating procedures. Adjusting infrastructure. And each change carries a cost. Because the system must adapt. And adaptation is not free. For taxpayers, this creates a sustained financial responsibility. Not just funding the system today, but supporting it over time. Through budgets. Through policies. Through long-term planning. Because the system does not disappear. It continues. And as it continues, its costs accumulate. For staff, long-term impact is part of their professional reality. Careers extend over years. Experience builds. Responsibilities evolve. But behind that is a system that depends on sustained funding. Because without financial support, the system cannot maintain its workforce. For individuals inside, long-term financial impact is not directly visible. What they experience is the environment. The routine. The structure. But behind that experience is a system that requires continuous investment. A system that must remain operational. A system that must adapt over time. And that adaptation has a cost. The broader system is also affected. As discussed in previous chapters, Cook County Jail is part of a larger network. And long-term financial impact extends across that network. Law enforcement. Courts. Public services. All connected. All influenced by changes in cost. Because when one part of the system changes, others must adjust. This creates a ripple effect. Budgets shift. Resources are reallocated. Priorities are reconsidered. And within that, the overall financial picture becomes more complex. This is what defines the long-term financial impact. Not a single expense. Not a short-term cost. But an ongoing commitment. A system that requires funding year after year. A system that evolves but does not disappear. And a system that continues to influence public resources. Because at Cook County Jail, the cost of detention is not limited to the present. It extends into the future. Through infrastructure. Through staffing. Through healthcare. Through the ongoing need to maintain and adapt the system. And within that, the true scale of the burden becomes clear. Not in daily operations alone, but in the long-term commitment required to sustain them. Public accountability and the cost of transparency. Inside Cook County Jail, the system operates continuously. But outside the walls, another process is always unfolding. Oversight. Because a system funded by the public is expected to be accountable to the public. And accountability is not automatic. It requires structure. It requires monitoring. It requires transparency. And all of that comes with a cost. Not a visible cost like staffing or infrastructure. But a necessary one. Because without oversight, the system cannot be evaluated. And without evaluation, it cannot improve. According to publicly available information and reports, correctional facilities in the United States are subject to multiple layers of oversight. Internal reviews. External audits. Government inspections. Each designed to ensure that the system operates within legal and ethical standards. But each also requires resources. Because oversight is a process. Not a single event. Internal oversight begins within the facility. Supervisors monitor operations. Reports are generated. Procedures are reviewed. Because maintaining accountability requires continuous attention. Not only when issues arise, but as part of daily operations. This creates an internal system of checks. Ensuring that staff follow procedures. That operations remain consistent. That the system functions as intended. But maintaining this system requires staff. Time. Coordination. Which adds to the cost. External oversight adds another layer. According to publicly available reports, correctional facilities may be reviewed by government agencies, inspector general offices, and independent organizations. These reviews examine different aspects of the system. Operations. Conditions. Compliance with standards. And while these processes are essential, they also require resources. Preparation of documents. Coordination with investigators. Implementation of recommendations. Each step involves effort. And each step contributes to the overall cost. Audits are a key part of transparency. Financial audits examine how funds are used. Operational audits evaluate efficiency. Compliance audits ensure that regulations are followed. These audits provide information. They create accountability. But they also require resources. Auditors must be employed. Data must be collected. Reports must be generated. And implementing audit findings may require changes. Updates to procedures. Additional training. System improvements. All of which have costs. Public reporting is another aspect. Budgets are published. Reports are made available. Information is shared with the public. Because transparency is part of accountability. But providing that transparency requires systems. Data collection. Analysis. Communication. And maintaining those systems adds to the financial burden. Legal oversight also plays a role. According to publicly available information, correctional facilities may be subject to legal review, including court cases and compliance with legal standards. These processes ensure that rights are protected. That conditions meet requirements. That the system operates within the law. But legal processes involve cost. Attorneys. Court proceedings. Documentation. And any required changes following legal decisions. Because compliance is not optional. It must be maintained. For taxpayers, this means funding not only the operation of the jail, but also the systems that monitor it. The systems that evaluate it. The systems that ensure accountability. Because transparency is not free. It requires investment. For staff, accountability is part of daily work. Procedures must be followed. Records must be accurate. Reports must be completed. Because every action may be reviewed. Every decision may be evaluated. And this creates an environment where attention to detail is essential. Because the system must not only function. It must demonstrate that it is functioning correctly. For individuals inside the jail, oversight is not always visible. What they experience is the environment, the routine, the structure. But behind that experience are systems designed to monitor conditions, to ensure standards are met, to provide accountability. And those systems require resources. The broader impact of transparency extends beyond the facility. Public trust is influenced by information, reports, audits, oversight findings. These shape how the system is understood, how it is evaluated, and how it is funded. Because decisions about budgets and policies are influenced by what is known and what is reported. This creates a connection between transparency and funding. Because information affects decisions, and decisions affect resources. Which means that accountability is not only about oversight. It is also about shaping the future of the system. But maintaining transparency requires continuous effort. Data must be collected regularly. Reports must be updated. Systems must remain accurate. Because outdated or incomplete information reduces effectiveness. And maintaining accuracy requires investment. This is what defines the cost of transparency. Not a single expense, but an ongoing process. A system of oversight that operates alongside the system of detention. Both necessary. Both requiring resources. Because at Cook County Jail, accountability is part of operation. Not separate from it. Integrated into daily processes. Embedded in procedures. And supported by systems designed to monitor and evaluate. And within that, the cost becomes clear. Not only in what the system does, but in how it is measured. How it is reviewed. How it is held accountable. Because a system of this scale cannot operate without transparency. And transparency, like everything else, comes with a cost. A cost that is essential. A cost that is continuous. A cost that ensures the system remains accountable to the public that funds it. The true cost to society. Inside Cook County Jail, the system operates with structure, routine, and constant funding. Every process has been examined. Daily operations. Staffing. Healthcare. Infrastructure. Legal delays. Turnover. Oversight. Each of these elements carries a cost. Each contributes to the overall financial burden. But beyond all of these measurable expenses, there is a deeper question. What is the true cost? Not just to budgets. Not just to taxpayers. But to society. Because the impact of a system like this does not end at the walls. It extends outward. Into communities. Into public systems. Into the broader social structure. According to publicly available information and research, detention systems influence more than the individuals inside them. They affect families, neighborhoods, and public resources in ways that are not always immediately visible. When individuals are held in custody, their absence creates effects. Families adjust. Communities adapt. Responsibilities shift. And these changes, while not always measured financially, still carry impact. Because systems are connected. And when one part changes, others respond. For individuals inside, detention is a direct experience. Time spent in custody. Routine defined by the system. Waiting for legal outcomes. But when they leave, the experience does not end. Re-entry becomes the next phase. Returning to society. Reconnecting with family. Seeking stability. And this transition requires support. According to publicly available reports, re-entry services often involve housing assistance, employment programs, and community support systems. These services require funding. Resources allocated to help individuals reintegrate. Because without support, the transition becomes more difficult. And that difficulty can affect broader systems. Employment is one example. Time spent in custody can interrupt work. Jobs may be lost. Income may be disrupted. And rebuilding that stability takes time. During that time, individuals may rely on public resources, support systems, assistance programs. And these services carry cost. Housing is another factor. Stable housing is essential for re-entry. But access may be limited, which can create demand for public housing or support services. And that demand requires funding. Healthcare continues beyond the jail. According to publicly available information, individuals who received medical care in custody may require ongoing treatment after release. This creates a shift from jail-based healthcare to community-based healthcare. And managing that transition involves resources, coordination, funding. Because care must continue. And the cost moves from one system to another. Families are also affected. When an individual is detained, family dynamics change. Responsibilities shift. Financial pressures increase. And these changes can have long-term effects. Not always visible in budgets, but present in communities. Because the impact of detention is not isolated. It spreads outward. Education and social systems are influenced as well. Children of detained individuals may face changes in support. Communities may experience shifts in resources. And these changes create additional demand for public services, which adds to the overall cost. Public perception is another dimension. How systems are viewed influences policy decisions, funding priorities, community trust. And these factors shape the future of the system. Because perception affects action. And action affects resources. For taxpayers, this means the cost of detention is not limited to the jail's budget. It includes the broader impact on public systems, the resources needed to maintain stability, and the long-term effects on communities. This creates a comprehensive financial picture. Not a single expense, but a network of costs. Connected, interdependent, and continuous. For staff, this broader impact may not always be part of daily operations. Their focus remains on maintaining the system, following procedures, ensuring stability. But the system they operate within is part of something larger. A network that extends beyond the facility. And that network is influenced by what happens inside. Because detention is not an isolated event. It is part of a process. One that begins with arrest, continues through custody, and extends into re-entry. And at each stage, resources are used. Costs are incurred. Impacts are created. This is what defines the true cost to society. Not only what is spent inside the jail, but what happens beyond it. The ripple effects. The extended impact. The ongoing connection between the system and the public. Because Cook County Jail is not separate from society. It is part of it. Funded by it. Connected to it. And influencing it. Every day. Through operations. Through outcomes. Through the individuals who pass through its system. And within that connection, the cost becomes more than financial. It becomes societal. A measure of how resources are used. How systems are structured. And how communities are affected. Because the true cost is not only what is paid. It is what is experienced. Across systems. Across communities. Across time. And understanding that cost requires looking beyond the walls. Beyond the daily operations. Beyond the visible expenses. To the broader impact. The one that continues even after the system has done its part. Because at Cook County Jail, the story does not end with detention. It continues. Through society. Through systems. Through the lasting effects of a structure that is always operating. And always connected to the world outside. This documentary is based on publicly available information and real-world accounts. Some details may be simplified for clarity.